This is Anarchast.
Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. We have coming in from the freer state, New Hampshire, Dayna Martin, and she's a big proponent of homeschooling and unschooling, and we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, let me ask you, Dayna, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, I've never really labeled myself as an anarchist. In fact, it's kind of a new realm for me to be learning about all this. I didn't even realize I was one. I think I am just naturally, and until I connected with a lot of anarchists myself. My uncle came to visit, and we're really close. He came to visit probably five years ago, and it was almost like he was coming out of the closet. He said, "I have to tell you, I'm an anarchist." And I said, "Oh, is that why you're dressing all in black all of a sudden?" I didn't really get the whole thing. When he really explained it to me, I think like most people, the assumption when I was younger was that it was kind of like an angry group of people, and one thing I learned from my uncle was that it's all about peace and love, and that totally resonated with me, and I began researching it more. And I had a friend from Texas who's really involved in the anarchist community say, you have to connect with this amazing group of people. He wanted to merge the unschooling community and the anarchist community and bring us together. So he was successful in doing that. And now I'm sharing a lot on shows like this. So
that's great. And just so you know, wearing black isn't mandatory.
I have learned that since, but at the time, he all of a sudden was wearing black all the time. And that was just his, style of whatever. But it was a funny, situation. So
yeah, well, let's get on to homeschooling and unschooling, because that's something that I'm really interested in, and a big reason I'm interested in it is I've started to realize over the years that if we're going to have a more peaceful, better, prosperous world, it really starts with the children. And I hate to talk like a politician there, it's all about the children, but really if we raise them properly, or I don't even want to say raise, that's not even a proper word either, but if we treat them properly and we don't use violence with children, we have a much better chance of having a much healthier environment in the future. And I think it all starts with schooling or even unschooling. And how many children do you have?
I have 4 kids,
oh, wow.
two boys and 2 girls. They are 5, 8, 11, and almost 14.
Wow. I have 2. Yeah, I can't imagine 4. That must be chaotic at times.
Well, I mean, yeah. Yeah, it is like any, no matter how you're parenting, it can get loud and crazy. So, yeah, it's really amazing. They're the ones that have brought me on this entire path. I never pictured myself parenting this way. I was, kind of a rebel as a teen, listening to metal music and going to concerts. And I remember the first time I ever heard the term anarchy was a Megadeth song, Anarchy in the USA, that they did a remake of. And that's the first time I ever heard the concept. And yeah, so I have 4 kids. They've never been to school, and not only that, but I want to focus on unschooling specifically, because homeschooling is not what we're doing. 90% of people that are, homeschooling do what schools do at home, and they buy a curriculum and coerce or force their kids to do what they think is best for them and to jump through hoops. But what we're doing is nothing like that. We live life as though school doesn't exist. We reject the institution altogether. So I'd love to share about that.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I really got into this unschooling thing recently. I'd never even heard the term until probably a few months ago, and it really got me excited about the possibilities. And I was sort of seeing that already. I wasn't really liking what we were doing with our kids, but I didn't know there was other options. I hadn't even thought about it before. So this is a whole area of interest for me, for sure. Did you always think this way, or did you come across this, were you just learning about this over the last few years, or where did you come from in this process?
Well, I mean, it happened when I was pregnant with my first child, 14 years ago. I started researching birthing options, and I had an amazing birth in a hospital. And after my son's birth, I realized that why was I even in a hospital? I didn't even need whoever was there, that I did it under my own power and so forth. So I reject the institution of hospitals for birth as well. And that kind of brought me down this interesting path. So my son, Devin, was born, and then a couple hours later, I was holding him, and the nurse turned the television on, and I saw Columbine happening live. It was the first thing I ever saw on TV since, giving birth. And it was pretty amazing, because I'm sitting there holding him and looking into his eyes, and at the same time watching parents losing their kids. And it was the first time I ever considered not sending my children to school. I had never thought about it. And so it wasn't that I was choosing not to out of fear that my kids would get shot. It was more like I thought it was disrespectful to force a child to go if they didn't want to. I thought about the kids that lost their lives and how many of those children would have preferred to have been home pursuing their own interests or spending time with their parents. And it just, the whole thing started my whole path, actually.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And I saw on your webpage a graphic that I really liked that said "Rethink Everything," and I think I've come across what I'm doing through more the anarchy way, and you've come across it more through unschooling. But it's a process of rethinking everything that we think we know or that we think we should do. And you look back at the way this public school system has been going, and that thing hasn't changed in over 100 years. It's still wooden chairs. They might have an iPad now, but it's still a chalkboard or a whiteboard, and you have to sit there for 8 hours, and it's really just a ridiculous system.
And when you do a little research, John Taylor Gatto writes a lot about the history of American education and why schools came to be. It's so empowering to learn that they were created to make factory workers, really. And the overall focus of obedience is what schools teach. And once you realize that and you learn about that, it's really empowering. Much the same journey for me with birth. My other 3 children were born at home, and I researched the history of how birth moved into the hospitals. And when you take the time to educate yourself, it's easier, I think, to let go of these institutions. And I love how our 2 communities are really merging, because I'm all excited about rethinking politics. And I have a lot of you guys excited about rethinking education and rethinking parenting. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us all to rethink a lot.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Most of the anarchists talk about how we don't want any government involvement in our life, and obviously public schools is one of the most obvious ways that that happens. And almost everybody still in a place like the US puts their kids into these indoctrination centers, and it really does need to be rethought, in my opinion. And I've learned so much just having my own children. I've been, the thing that really, when I see my own children, especially how we've started to change and now we're doing more unschooling type things, kids want to learn. They're just full of questions. I think it's the school system that over years and years sort of, gets that out of them. I know me personally, after about grade 6, I just had enough of that thing, and I just wanted to learn my own things. I wanted to learn about computers and other things that I was interested in. And so, yeah, I think that's a great way to interact with your children, is to let them learn what they want to learn about. And there's no shortage of things they want to learn about. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a whole way of looking at parenting and children's rights that there's so many things that are so wrong with schools and traditional parenting to me. Like, I think one of the basic of human rights is the right to own what's in your mind and not having it constantly prodded and having somebody try to evaluate what's in it. That's so wrong from a basic human rights standard. So I love bringing the whole idea of respecting a child's choice. So what a child learns is also very, very personal. And unschooling is the perfectly individualized education, because my children pursue whatever they want in life, and I facilitate that. So I'm not my child's teacher standing in front of them, pouring knowledge into them with what I think they should know to be successful in life. They are interested in things, and I bring as much of those resources in their lives as possible to learn and grow from based on their interests, no matter what they are. So learning is like breathing. Humans are meant to learn, and we've just separated it so much, making it seem like learning is so difficult, that learning to read is challenging, and you have to pour over phonics books for years and practice letter writing. It's all bunk. None of it's true. My kids learn to read just through being surrounded by the written word and having the internal motivation to use reading and writing as a real tool to get more of what they want in life. So everything you thought you knew about learning is wrong. It's time to rethink all of it.
Totally. I have an 8-year-old son who was born in Germany, so he spoke fluent German. And then he moved over here about 2 years ago to Mexico with us. And we never even tried to teach him Spanish. We never sat him down and then gave him a book or anything. But within 1 year, his Spanish was already way better than mine.
Yeah, well, total immersion learning, that's what it's all about. People don't believe me when I say my kids taught themselves to read. You do need to facilitate it through surrounding them with the written word and encouraging technology and so forth. So I think it's a matter of just facilitating whatever interest it is. For example, I look at whatever my kids are interested in at the time as the nucleus of their learning. So when my son Devin was like 4 or 5, he was really into Legos. So I thought to myself, how many resources can I bring into his life to touch on all these different ways that he could learn and grow? And we got Lego magazine for him. We brought him to Lego displays and all these different, Lego workshops and all these different ways to nurture this interest. And we do not break our life down into subjects. So people are so brainwashed through their own school experience and through our culture to think that you need to live life that way, broken down, English, math, science. We don't even live life like that. It's just life. And so when you let go of all those compartmentalized ways of looking at learning, you're just living and you're learning. However, if I was to break our life down into subjects, you would see through facilitating an interest that if you bring a lot of resources into your kids' lives, they do learn all these things. They learn math, English, science, all through all these amazing resources. So I think it's very important for my children to know that learning never ends. It doesn't end because you're 18 and you graduate. I need to model that learning is fun and feels good and it's part of being human. So I'm always learning and pursuing new things myself, and my new interest being in really delving into anarchism and what this is all about and who am I and what are my beliefs. And so my kids are seeing me read these books and on these websites and asking me questions like, what is this? And that's just, one way to explain learning is you just never stop yourself.
Yeah, I want to ask you about video games, because I grew up on video games. I was a video game junkie. And I often hear from parents how they'll say, oh, my kid plays video games, that's terrible, it's a waste of time. For me personally, I think video games are a great learning tool. You're immersed into this environment. You have to figure it out. You have to figure out how to win. You have to figure out how to interact with the other players in the game, and hand-eye coordination, all kinds of things. What's your thoughts on video games?
I totally support my kids playing video games, any game they choose for as long as they want. I know that sounds really crazy, and people think that it means that children will want to do nothing but that. And sometimes they do. But my son Devin was really into Minecraft. I don't know if your kids if you've heard of that. If you have kids into video games, you probably have. We totally supported his desire to play this game Minecraft. So much, in fact, that we brought him to Las Vegas to meet the creator of the game, Notch, who's from Sweden. And we totally embraced it and brought so many resources into his life. He learned so much from that game. Well, a month ago, I read about a Swedish school that it's now mandatory to play Minecraft in this school because it's such an amazing learning tool. Again, it's a matter of unbrainwash yourself and rethinking everything. And there's so many amazing books on the topic. I think a lot of us coming to this life of freedom have been some brainwashed with a lot of propaganda against technology. And, we're in a day and age where technology is just part of life. And my son Devin learned to read through playing video games online. If it wasn't for the game RuneScape, Devin probably would have learned to read, but it would have been a little bit later. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've actually used that for my son as well. He's just learning to read now, and he'll often ask me. He'll say, "Papa, what does the game say?" And I'll say, "Oh, you got to learn how to read, and then you can do that." He's like, "I know, I want to. It's just I haven't figured it all out yet." It's like, that's okay. Speaking of different learning tools, of course the internet is such a great wealth of information. All information's on the internet. There's things like the Khan Academy if you want to learn math in a really interesting way. I've actually taken a number of those courses. I'm really bad at math, and I've kind of been trying to relearn it. I never learned it in school very well because I didn't like the way that they were teaching me, but the Khan Academy is great, and MIT has all their courses online for free. There's something called Coursea.org, which has literally tens of thousands of courses you can take all free. Do you use any of these sort of things?
No, not yet in my children's lives. They have no interest. I think if they want a career that requires that, I'll give them that as a resource to learn and grow from. There was a study done where a 17-year-old, when they were ready to learn math, they learned it in about 2 months, an entire 12-year career of school, because their brain was ripe and ready. We spend so much time trying to force kids to learn when they're not emotionally, developmentally ready to learn it. And so math, people grow up thinking that they're bad at math like you do. It's so conditioned, so brainwashed. You're not bad at math. Your brain wasn't ready to absorb what they were introducing to you at the time. So you need to heal from that, Jeff.
I'm trying. Every day I'm trying. So what's a typical day like for you in your household?
I get this question so much, and it's hard to answer because there's no typical day. It's much like what people do on a weekend. If you had the freedom to do whatever you wanted to do all day, every day, what would you do? That's what our kids do.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear these views because I'd always sense that's the correct way to do things. But it's very in society, it's just not very well known, these other options, these other ways of living. And so it is really great to hear your viewpoint on things like that. And I read recently something that I found really interesting. There was a book, and I forget the name of the book, but the guy said that putting these kids in a classroom with all their same age group, all in the same room, and they go with this same age group for 12 years straight, is really bad, because especially once they hit puberty, they need to be around adults and other age groups so they can learn how to deal with these new emotions and feelings. Is that anything that you've thought or looked into?
Yeah, age segregation is so unnatural, and it's really cruel, actually. They now punish kids in some schools for socializing with a child in a different grade. I think that's ridiculous, and my kids have no concept of that at all. They make friends just like we do as adults based on common interests. They have friends that are 3 years old all the way up to 80 years old. My son Devin was really good friends with an old woman that lived down the street, and he learned so much from her. So much of our life and learning is about apprenticeships, mentorships, being surrounded with people that are passionate about whatever they're doing. I'd be limiting their learning and growth so much if I only let them be with kids the same age. It's a very unnatural and damaging way to go about it. But, you know, when you don't have kids in school, people ask you all the time, how are your kids going to socialize? And I say to them, their socialization is like the last thing I'm worried about, because they have a really natural socialization process, for sure. Another thing about schools that I want to point out is schools are creating worker bees, and unschoolers, we are raising free-thinking entrepreneurs. And I created a saying that I love, and it's, my unschooled child will hire your honor student. I have it on a bumper sticker. It's my hottest seller, because people don't think of it like that. My kids have had their own businesses for as long as they could even grasp the concept. My son Devin was 5, and he had a business called Devin's Confections, where he made his own chocolate. We facilitated it by learning about how to make chocolate. We bought him all the chocolate making tools and little boxes and ribbons to mail them in. Devin has Etsy shops where he makes jewelry, he makes wooden swords. My daughter Tiffany makes more money as a pet sitter than a lot of adults I know, and she's 11. So we are raising children that are making money off what they love doing, and anybody can do that. So that's something very important. People say, how are your kids going to function in the real world? Our kids are the ones in the real world all day, every day. They're not locked in a brick building for 12 years away from the real world. That's a big argument that I get all the time. So I'd love to prove people wrong with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, if you were going to classify me, and I know you don't like labels, but if you were, I'm an anarchocapitalist. So I'm basically an entrepreneur who just believes that I should, you know, I don't want people to coerce me or steal my money or force me to do things. And that was the one thing that I always looked back at school, public school, and said, there was not one class about entrepreneurship. That should be one of the most obvious things that you would want to teach someone or help them learn about, is how to create things and make money and be successful. And that's never taught in public schools.
The government doesn't want our kids to learn that. Are you kidding? They want them to be good little worker bees in their cubicles, making the whole machine run. So we are busting out of that and saying, no, this isn't working for us. Our kids, their destinies are much greater than this, than being, oh, somebody posted on my wall today that 67% of Americans hate their jobs. For me, this life is about being happy first and you know, finding your bliss and your joy every day, as hippie-ish as that may sound to some people. And in doing so, you can make an amazing income off of just pursuing whatever you're passionate and interested in. So we're busting through a lot of myths and rethinking a lot.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said, and it's really nice to hear all of this. It's totally like that people, the public schools do not want the people there to learn about how to actually be a successful individual entrepreneur or anything like that. They'll never teach you that. They don't even teach you what the money system is, of course. I found that also funny that, you know, if you're going to have these schools and you actually want to teach them things that they're going to need in life, that they hardly teach you anything you really need to know in life. And you see that now in the US, so many people graduate with their high school diploma and they don't know how to do anything. So many people graduate from college and don't know how to do anything. It's almost like, and, you know, but at that time they're like 25 years old. They've yet to even do anything in life. They've just memorized mostly useless information and learned how to obey and comply.
Yeah, there's an awesome movement called the Uncollege movement. I run a conference in Texas every year. It's happening at the end of August, the last week in August this year. It's called the Rethinking Everything Conference, and we have somebody from the Uncollege movement. A gentleman wrote a book called Hacking Your Education, and somebody that promotes his work is coming to speak, and they talk about what an amazing scam and ripoff colleges really are, that they're huge business. You can learn anything you can learn in college online or in other resources that we have in our world. So people are waking up to this for sure.
Yeah, it's great, and hopefully more people will. And do you have a website or a Facebook page or anything that people can get more information about what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I have a website myself. It's daynamartin.com, DaynaMartin, and I have a lot of articles and videos about unschooling and parenting on there to introduce people to this concept. I also wrote a book called Radical Unschooling, A Revolution Has Begun, which introduces the whole core concepts and the philosophy of radical unschooling. I also really recommend, like I was just talking about John Taylor Gatto, I recommend his book, Dumbing Us Down, to learn the history of education. He was New York City's Teacher of the Year for like 4 or 5 years in a row, and he actually endorsed my book, and he is an awesome person to learn the history of education and the history of schools. Once you learn about that, man, you have to take the time as a parent to unbrainwash yourself. Kids come to this life so easily and naturally. It's really where they want to be. This is where they're happy, and it's nothing you have to do to your kids. People ask me all the time, how do I come to this life? And it's like, you're the one that has to do the work, not your kids.
That's great, and we'll have links to all those books down below this video. And I'd like to thank you very much, Dayna, for spending some time with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was fun. I've learned a little bit myself, so I'm anxious to keep pursuing learning more about anarchism, and yeah,
we'll learn more every day. That's what we're sort of meant to do as humans. Most people kind of lose sight of that, unfortunately. So that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.